We are almost 3 weeks into meteorological spring, and astronomical spring is upon us, so it's time to look back at my winter weather forecast that I made in October and December of 2022 for how well I did forecasting the winter. I will also be giving my early predictions for next winter, what I like to call the way too early predictions. I will do this in the same order that I showed the predictions in the slides from those winter weather presentations. So we're going to start off with precipitation. I made the same prediction in both the October and December forecast, 28 to 36 inches for the water year with less than 14.97 inches for the winter. That is, I specifically chose that because one, that was how much rain we had last winter, and two, that is the all year's median for the Portland airports where the precipitation totals are measured. Best estimates were 33 inches in October, and I lowered it slightly to 32 inches in December. The overall result, the water year so far has 24.74 inches, which results in a trend cast total of about 34.58 inches. A note about the trend cast, that assumes every day hits the average precipitation, which may or may not happen. It's just if it keeps pace, that will result to about 94% of average, which would be a forecast hit. December through February had 13.58 inches. So as a result, I'm going to say a partial hit is guaranteed due to the winter precipitation total being under the 14.97 inches that I forecast. And the water year totals is to be determined, but it leans to be a hit at this time. I'd probably say the odds are about 70 to 80%. For the average temperature departure for the winter, predictions in October, I said the temperature should be anywhere from about 2.5 degrees below average to a degree above average, with my best estimate being a degree below average. And in December, I said anywhere from 0 to 4 degrees below average with the best estimate of 1.5 degrees below average. The actual was 1.2 degrees below average. And this is about as perfect as possible because I round my best estimates to the nearest 0.5 degree to make it a little simpler. And I got right in between these two best estimate, at least using the monthly data that I put into my Excel spreadsheet, and then using the monthly weighting formula, weighting December and January slightly heavier than February. That turned out to be the 1.2 degrees below average, the lowest temperature. I forecasted below 20 degrees for both the October and December forecast, with the best estimate of 15 degrees, which I reduced to 13 degrees in December. The result, 18 degrees was the lowest temperature that occurred, and this does break a 5-year streak for failing to get below 20 degrees, which is a climate adjusted and unadjusted record. The previous time we went below 20 degrees was in January of 2017. We hit 11 degrees as our lowest temperature that month for reference. Score, a forecast hit as a result. The peak wind gust. I, in both October and December, predicted a peak wind gust of 45 to 55 miles per hour. The actual was 51 miles per hour. This actually did not occur in the damaging windstorm that occurred 2 days after Christmas. This actually occurred in January in a lesser known windstorm that caused minimal to no damage for at least most of us in the lowlands. This is a forecast hit as a result. The most active time, I only made a forecast in the December outlook because I was not confident enough to make a forecast in my October outlook. My December prediction, I said anywhere from January 10th through the 31st, which ended up being the only time it really wasn't active. The actual was that we had significant events in early November, late December, and late February. I'll show the events in the next slide. So the score, it's not applicable in October due to the lack of a prediction and was a forecast missed in December. So the main events on November 6th, an inch of surprise afternoon and evening snow occurred mainly in Corvallis, and this did stick during the overnight hours and cause some travel impacts. From December 22nd through the 24th, there was a minor Arctic blast, the lowest high temperature being 25 degrees. And while in the Portland area, it was originally a sleet storm that changed over to an ice storm on the second and third day. It was primarily an ice storm in the Willamette Valley south of the Portland metro area. On December 27th, a damaging windstorm occurred with a peak wind gust at 49 miles per hour. Normally, that would not cause significant damage. However, the ground was saturated by the Arctic blast that occurred right before and heavy rainfall that occurred on Christmas and the day after Christmas. In late February, we had the snowpocalypse that caused Portland to shut down for a few days at least, some areas for a week. I am posting another video for the forecast review that I promised about 3 weeks ago now. And the early morning snows did continue into March, and there was another isolated snow impact on Valentine's Day, but none of these had significant impacts on your life, so I will not be including that in the peak time slide, but just as side notes. Mount Hood April 1st snow depth, well, it's not April 1st yet, but I can reasonably tell what it's going to be like on April 1st. So in October, I predicted 80 to 120% of normal, while in December, I raised this to 100 to 150% of normal. The data as of March 1st showed that the basin-wide average on Mount Hood, which also includes the Sandy River Basin and parts of the lower Deschutes Basin, was 104%, based on the recent snowfall right before the warm spell we got recently. This increased to right around 120%. I do believe it has gone down a little bit, so I'll use the March 1st numbers for now. It was also at the Mount Hood test site at 91%, which means that while it is a likely hit in October, as I don't foresee any significant melting to occur, I do think it's a little too close to call for December, mainly for the Mount Hood test site. It looks to be a half hit would be highly likely. A full hit is still probable, but we'll see what happens later in the month. Now, for the valley snowfall, predictions in October for the Northern Valley, mainly the Portland metro area, I predicted anywhere from 1 inch to 5 inches, with my best estimate being 3 inches. And for the South Valley, anywhere from 2 to 8 inches. My best estimate was 5 inches. In December, I predicted anywhere from 2 to 8 inches, regardless of where you are at in the valley. The best estimate in the Northern Valley, I said 4 inches. In the Southern Valley, I said 6 inches. Though I was not confident enough in the Southern Valley being far enough above the Northern Valley to go to a higher margin of error, say a 4 to 12 inch prediction or a 3 to 10 inch prediction, than I am the 2 to 8 inch prediction. So, as I've done the previous years, I use a population weighted average where I use 14 different locations around the Willamette Valley, each location representing about 200,000 people or 250,000 people or so. I apologize. So here they are. This is not the same thing that I am going to show for the storm recap video, where I will include more totals than these, and I do leave a few of these out. So in the main portion land-wise of the Willamette Valley, Eugene, Corvallis, and Salem did get between the 2 and 8 inches that I forecasted in October, Anywhere from about 2 to 6 inches was pretty typical in the central and southern Willamette Valley. But once you move into the Portland metro area, only Oregon City got in that 1 to 5 inch range. Otherwise, it was more typical for spots to receive anywhere from 6 inches to about 1.5 feet in some isolated spots, mainly the upper hills. Most of the lowlands only got to about 14 inches was the highest I've seen on any report, and that was in the Gresham area. The population weighted average was 7.72 inches, which surprisingly results in a December forecast hit. For October, I didn't use the population weighted average because it was clear that Portland was a forecast miss, but it was also pretty clear that the rest of the valley was a forecast hit, so I decided to give myself a partial hit as a result. So the guide to the scorecard is the following. The dark green means a guaranteed hit. The lighter green means things are trending towards a hit, but there is still time for a major pattern change that could occur, that could change it to a miss, though not something I am forecasting. And that yellow is the partial hit I mentioned from the October forecast for valley snowfall, with one thing left to be decided. The darker red is a forecast miss. And for the overall score of the 3 years that I've released public winter weather predictions, this is the best year that I've had, scoring 5.5 out of 6, assuming these trend hits change to actual hits. And in December, either a 5.5 out of 7 to a 6 out of 7, depending on what happens for the mountain snow depth. So, very good year for me, and I am more than happy with how this turned out, though there is still a little room for improvement in the valley snowfall department. That is it for the winter weather verification. It is time now for the first in the metro area, aka the way too early predictions for the 2023 to 2024 winter weather season. And I know it's 9 months away, but there are some things we can't predict this far out, or at least that I can. Disclaimers, this is mainly off of statistics based off of previous years. However, I can predict next year's ENSO state with the sunspot cycle where we are currently at, so I will actually be doing that this year, though I will not be doing analog years until October. Also, not all 7 forecast parameters will be used, as a few of them do require analog years. So as a result, stuff like the peak wind gust, for example, will not be super simplified, and other things like the peak time will not be included. So the sunspot cycle, an El Nino is heavily favored, and this midpoint in the sunspot cycle has a 90% correlation to a flip in the ENSO cycle. There's only one known case that I am aware of from when NOAA started recording the ONI back in 1950 to now, and when you're about 28 or so percent through the sunspot cycle, that's when that ENSO cycle tends to flip. It could be a few months from that, but that 28% hits this month, March of 2023, because the minimum occurred in November of 2019. So as a result, an El Nino is pretty favored, though the strength is still to be determined. What happens normally during an El Nino? I have 2 slides of this. The water year median, a weak El Nino actually has above normal rainfall, with 38.59 inches as the median. Moderate El Ninos do have below normal rainfall at 33.51 inches, while strong El Ninos have 35.85 inches. I should mention that the super El Ninos, aka the top 3 strongest ones in history, were all above average, and 2 of them I have classified as hyperactive, which is my fancy term for the top 10% wettest years that Portland has experienced. For the record, the all years median is 35.43 inches, which is different from the climate normals, which is 36.91 inches. So the median is a little bit below that mean. So just FYI there. Now, 2 out of 29 El Niños have had an average winter temperature 2 degrees or more below average. That's not really good odds when you compare this to a La Nina, which was 6 La Ninas compared to 30 total, in neutrals, which have had 4 being 2 degrees or more below average compared to 24 occurrences of an ENSO neutral year. So it's less likely than usual that we'll have below normal temperatures. Also, as a note, I have not seen a strong La Nina be classified as a below normal winter. A below normal winter I classify as a degree or more below average. That doesn't mean we can't get a below normal month or two. It just means that statistics do not favor it. Strong windstorms are not likely in an El Nino. If you want a strong windstorm, you want ENSO neutral. Also, most of the lowest temperatures and Arctic blasts occurred in January and December. And as a side note, there has been no Arctic blasts that have occurred in a moderate El Nino, at least none that meet my criteria. Below normal mountain snowfall is typical, though there have been years where above normal mountain snowfall has occurred. And then the snow median, I'm going to use the unadjusted totals for simplicity here. I'll go back to the adjusted totals in October. So this might be different now from what you hear me saying in October. The weak El Niños have a 3.2 inch unadjusted median. The moderate has a 2.5 inch unadjusted median, and the strong El Niños has a 0 inch unadjusted median, aka more than half the years that have had a strong El Nino have had 0 inches of snowfall. When you include all 83 winters that the Portland airport has recorded data, that turns out to be 3.4 inches. Again, unadjusted. When you adjust that to counteract the decrease in snowfall from the 40s through the early 70s, that turns out to be about 3.1 inches. Now, on to the statistics, and I'm only going to be using data that has occurred since 1940 for this, because that's how long the Portland airport has recorded data. So for this first one, 8 winters in a row have occurred with measurable snowfall. This has tied the record long. As a side note, that record long total had 1 year in the middle where that snowfall occurred as either sleet or more likely hail. So that record is in question. If you do not count that, the previous record long was 7 winters, and this would be the record long. So the likelihood of this occurring next winter is 5.3%. And I do consider statistically significant a 95% chance of occurring / 5% chance of not occurring, or vice versa. So it's just barely out of statistically significant. However, of the 23 winters with no snowfall, 20 had their lowest temperatures over 20 degrees. So this is the reverse of the same statistic that I gave during the previous 3 winters, where I was confident that the temperature would get below 20 degrees. So, just as an FYI, even though we flipped to a colder pattern this winter, it's probably not going to stay next winter, especially if we get no snowfall. If we assume an El Nino next winter, only 3 El Nino winters have had a temperature less than 1.5 degrees below average. All those 3 winters were, or 2 of those 3 were more than 2 degrees below average, and that third one was between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees below average. So the likelihood of occurring is about 17.6%. And when you compare this to the all winters that the Portland airport has occurred, 17 of the 83 winters have had an average temperature 1.5 degrees or more below their decade's average. I use decade average rather than the official averages NOAA puts out, because as one, it counteracts climate trends that have occurred, and then 2, to me, it's a better gauge on the decadal fluctuations that occur due to stuff like the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillations. So just a side note there, slightly different than what I showed earlier. Then, snow totals in Portland have been 6 inches or more for now 3 winters in a row. Please note that this statistic does not apply for Wilsonville South, as unless if you're in Dallas or the higher hills, I did not see any location record 6 inches or more during this past winter, though I did see it occur 2 winters ago. Chance of 6 inches or more of snow occurring next winter is only 2.5% as a result. And I'm only going to include years since 1970 for this statistic because the 1970s was the first decade where our snowfall in the Portland area has leveled out to an average of about 43 inches a decade. This actually surprisingly raises the chances about 0.8% compared to unadjusted overall records, which I found a little interesting. So, here are the predictions that I can make this far out. All of these are subject to change in October, and I do not grade these because of how far out these are. So, for the water year, these are too early to tell. The average temperature, I don't expect it being more than 2 degrees below average, with an above average temperature being more likely. If it is below average, it's probably only a degree below average at most. Lowest temperature, I do forecast the lowest temperature to be above 20 degrees next year. The peak wind gust, I'm predicting a peak wind gust to be less than 60 miles per hour. Do expect that prediction to be going down if the ENSO state looks like it's going to be a moderate or a stronger El Nino. A weak El Nino has had a few moderate windstorms, but nothing in the major category for Portland. The most active time, it's too early to tell. I need analog years for that, and it's too early to get the analog years. Then for the mountain snowfall depth on April 1st, too early to tell. And for the valley snowfall, less than 6 inches for sure in Portland. Too early to tell for predictions for the rest of the Willamette Valley. And I do forecast a greater than 50% chance of no snow for next winter. It would be higher if that was in the statistically significant category, but it's not. So I'll keep it a little lower to give the benefit of the doubt. Also, the off chance, about 10%, it changes over to ENSO neutral rather than El Nino. So that is it for this video. If you have not checked out the Snowpocalypse recap video, I do encourage you to do so, though it is a long video. For those who are at least interested in how my short range forecast performed there. I've had 3 weeks to think on it, so that should be more than enough time to make any reflections. So this is it for the scheduled videos I said I would put out. So unless if there is a major forecast of event in the coming months, the next video is probably going to be in October, unless if I think of another weather video to post. So until then, please stay safe out there and take care.